What's up, marketers? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I perform a creative audit for the brands I work with. A huge thanks to Varos for sponsoring this video, which is a tool that I rely on heavily during this process, but more on that in a minute. Now, I've done creative audits for hundreds of brands, and this data is absolutely key to making creative that converts on the Facebook ads platform. In fact, not knowing this data about your creative often leads to very stupid mistakes. Be sure to stay to the very end where I explain what you should actually be doing with this research. Now, the first thing you want to do before you even dive in and look at the creatives is get a performance download. So I would really zoom in on the last 30 days of performance metrics. I'd look at spend, purchases, CPA, ROAS, hook rates, hold rates, outbound click-through rates, and frequency. And what I would do is I would look at this over the last 30 days, but also zoom out to the last 6 months and see, hey, how have these metrics been tracking up and down for the brand? And really, this is overall going to tell me the current status of the brand. I'm going to be able to see if they're actually reaching their goals by looking at their spend and their purchases and their cost per purchase. And I'm also going to see how their video performance metrics compare high level to the platform standards. So how are hook and hold rates actually comparing to the platform standards? Click-through rate specifically is something that I like to track over time and really just get an average baseline of the account. And then there's frequency, which could be an early warning sign that they don't have enough creative variety in the account if they keep on hitting the same people over and over again. But that's also going to largely depend on their spend. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, specifically over the last 30 days, sometimes over the last 90 days, depending on the ad spend, is I'm also going to do an analysis on their breakdown data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look and see, okay, where are the spend and purchases coming from in relation to age range, in relation to gender, in relation to placements. And this is going to give some high-level insight to, hey, are we actually even reaching the right people? And is the talent in our ads potentially off the mark somehow? And when we think about placements, we're going to be able to see, okay, are we actually making the right creative for the right placements? Or should we be investing more into UGC 9x16s to try and tap into more of those stories and reels placements if they're profitable for us? I would not throttle spend in that aspect because that tends to lead to a degradation of results. So once I've done this performance download overview, that's when I actually like to compare a brand's metrics to other benchmarks in their industry. And the tool that I use for this is Varos. And one of the best things about this tool is I can actually narrow those benchmarks to specific campaign types, industry, as well as ad spend. So let's go ahead and hop in the platform really quick so I can show you around. So when we jump in here, we can immediately see where our company is pacing against low performers, medium performers, and high performers in our industry. You can see right here where we can choose the vertical as well as the spend per month and AOV. And we can actually zoom in on these specific metrics, which is really valuable when trying to get a sense of where the brand that I'm auditing is at in comparison to other brands. So here we have cost per purchase. We have ROAS, CPM, link click-through rate. Another thing that I like to zoom in onto are the video ad KPIs. So here we can actually zoom in on, hey, how does our hook rate compare to others in the vertical? What about 50% of views, 75% of views? And also looking at through plays, which is just their hold rate metric. We can also see the average time watched. Another thing that I like to look at here is media mix. So you're actually able to see the spend distribution for other brands in your industry through Facebook, Google, and TikTok. Benchmarking your KPIs is one of the smartest things that you can do as an advertiser because you actually more fully understand your place in the market. So what I like to do is I like to take the performance download overview that I did in the previous section and compare all of those data and metrics to the Varos benchmarking data. And here's where I like to zone in on key insights. For instance, if I see that a brand's click-through rate is a lot lower than its competitors, that might be a sign that they really need to zoom in on their creative and figure out how something else can be working better there. Or if you see that CPMs have spiked for your brand over a specific period of time, you really need to zoom in on what was happening there inside of your ad account to try and diagnose what was going on. To benchmark your data against your competitors and sign up for a free 14-day trial, be sure to sign up in the link in the description bar below. You can also get 20% off using the code DARA, D-A-R-A. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to do a qualitative analysis on what they're currently running in their ad account. And I actually like to do that just inside of Facebook Ads Library. So let's do this for Spoiled Child. So I'm going to go through this and ask myself a few questions. I'm going to see really, hey, what types of formats are they testing? And I see right now, oh, it seems like they have quite a bit of UGC. They're using some split screen action here and here. They have a 60-day risk-free trial. And okay, I'm also taking note of what type of creators and talent they're using inside of their ads. And another thing I'm going to do is really pay attention to, okay, what types of hooks and editing styles are they using? It's kind of interesting. For Spoiled Child, they really are zooming in a lot on UGC, but they aren't really using native style fonts. And that's something that I would definitely ask the brand about. Is that a conscious choice? Is that something that you're doing without much thought? You know, it's kind of hard to say because I've never worked with this brand. Okay, it seems like they also use some UGC and higher end studio shoot mashups, which is kind of interesting.
I bought the viral TikTok with.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit more higher end. Lots of UGC mashups. Oh, I like this stuff. Very oddly satisfying.
For self-care, and my skin was paying the price.
Oh, that's very cool. I would also take a look and see, hey, which ad creative has been running the longest? And really what I'm trying to take note looking at all of this is trying to identify trends, trying to identify things that they seem to be testing over and over again, but also identifying if there are certain gaps or room for opportunities that they could be using currently in their ad creative. I'd say looking at Spoiled Child, it seems to default super heavily on UGC, and they have a little bit of studio content mixed in, but they really do seem to be missing a lot more of the images and the image style graphics, like the features point outs and us versus them that we know work really well. So we want to dig in and see, okay, have they actually tested something like that before? And if not, that could be a really easy win for them to test into something like that. And once we've done the qualitative ads library overview, then we're going to zoom in on some more specific creative metrics. And what I like to do initially is really zoom in on the top performers. If it's a brand that's spending $500K or more per month, I'm going to be looking at about 8 top performing creatives. But if it's a bit of a smaller brand, then I'm really just going to zoom in on 4 or 5 of the top performers. And initially I'm going to look at, okay, what is going on over the last 30 days? What are the ad creatives that are getting the most spend and the most amount of purchases or the highest return within that 30-day period? Those are going to be your top performers. And then I'm also going to zoom out a little bit and see, hey, what about over the last 6 months? And what I'm going to do when I'm looking at those ad creatives is I'm going to be identifying, hey, are there any creatives that have been running a long time? Those tend to be the hero unicorn ads, but also see if there's any similarities in things that tend to perform over time, any formats, any imagery, any creators. But also we want to look at things that have changed here. This is another really good time to think about that great Varos data that you zoomed in on and see how your top performers are comparing to the other highest performers in your industry. Once you've gotten an understanding of what the top performers have been over 30 days, over the last 6 months, and you've identified those trends or opportunities, that's when I would then do a hook and hold rate analysis on your video creative. So what I would do is I would take a look at the video creative that got the most amount of spend, and then I would identify the creatives that had the highest hook rates and really zoom in on, okay, what types of format are they using? How are they actually showing the creative on second 1 all the way up to second 3? Is there any type of talent or creator or even other type of imagery that they are using within that first 3 seconds? And also zone in on that messaging. What type of messaging are they using to hook that initial user? And then I would do the exact same thing for a hold rate analysis. So I would really be focusing on, okay, what are the video creatives that have the highest hold rates, and really go beyond that initial hook. Because what you're going to find is that a lot of times the creatives that had the highest hook rates also have a lot of overlap with what has the highest hold rates, but you want to see, okay, what is happening in that subsequent imagery and messaging after that hook. What type of messaging is there? What type of imagery is there? And also pay attention to the editing styles. Are there certain editing styles that tend to lead to higher hook rates? That's definitely something that you'll want to zoom in on and focus on, as well as overall storytelling technique. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is a quick format analysis. So first you want to do it really basic. So what you want to do is you want to split all of the creatives over the last 90 days into images, video, and carousel, and really break down those performance metrics again to see, okay, are we leaving something on the table? Should we be leaning a little bit more into images? Or what I often see is that brands aren't really spending that much into carousels, but there is a little bit more room to test into that type of primary format. And then of course, depending on if the naming convention is really thorough or they're using a platform like Motion, I would also do an analysis based on secondary formats. So looking at things like before and afters versus us versus them versus features point outs, or if it's primarily video, UGC versus product explainers versus founders ads. Here we're really going to be able to identify what type of formats are actually moving the needle, in addition to all of the great imagery and messaging insights we've got previously from our top creative analysis, as well as our hook and our hold rate analysis. Now, what do you do after you get all of that amazing information? And it's going to be different for every single brand, right? But what you want to do is take a step back and really identify what your next goal is after conducting this creative audit. Is it to get better performance, or is it to scale? And very often when I ask this question to brands, they're like, both. But the reality is that if your scaling is completely dependent on performance or fixing your performance, then what you'd really want to do is take a step back, fix your performance, and then start to scale. Another question that you're going to have to be realistic about at this point is, what is more important? Urgency versus time, or performance potential? Because a lot of times, I worked with agencies for many years, when we got into an ad creative account and where we onboarded a new brand, they were like, we need creative immediately. And we were like, oh gosh, okay. So we had to prioritize things that we could get done a lot quicker versus things that we thought would have the biggest impact on performance, because sometimes those things took a lot longer. But really, it's going to be a combination and marriage of both. And the way that I really like to think about this, once you've gotten out of the hole of, hey, we need the quickest things now, is really zooming in on these three things. So when you're thinking about performance potential, the first thing that you're going to want to execute on are quick and easy wins. If you have seen something through this amazing creative audit where you're like, hey, actually they haven't tested into this type of format before, or hey, they could do this really simple iteration on this creative and I think it could have a big impact, that's something that you want to prioritize because it's able to get out the door a lot quicker and you think it has real performance potential. The next thing that you're going to want to execute on is if there are any sort of wrongs that they need to right with their ad creative. Maybe you did an age analysis breakdown and you saw, hey, actually, we're targeting people that are a lot older than the people that we are actually featuring in the UGC. This could be a signal that you need to get more age appropriate creators into the mix on your creatives. And then the next thing that you're going to want to execute on are those content gaps. So those tend to be bigger and larger projects, right? I can't tell you how many times I've jumped into an ad account and I'm like, oh, they're not running any UGC, or oh, they have an amazing founder story, but they haven't actually tried out that type of ad angle before. Those are things that are generally going to take a little bit longer to execute on in the background, which is why when we're developing that initial creative roadmap based on this audit, we're first going to look at those quick and easy wins that we can get out the door within a few days or a week or two, and then also look at the longer term rights that we need to wrong with the content strategy. Again, those tend to take a little bit more time, and then while in the background we are focusing on those bigger swing creative tests that we have high confidence on that are going to really move the needle, but again, tend to take a little bit more time. And that's it. If you guys are interested in checking out Varos and benchmarking your data against your competitors, be sure to look out for that link in the description bar below, and I will see you next week. See ya.